I started out actually as a fiction film editor. And I got quite frustrated, actually, because the industry at that time was extremely rules-oriented, even though I was a big admirer of the new Hollywood, you know, Scorsese and Coppola and all that. But it's extremely rules-oriented. Even in the cutting room, it was very rules-oriented. And also, you ended up working on a lot of bad movies. And as an editor, you were fixing all sorts of mistakes. And I thought, well, screw this, you know, and I actually went and shot a doc with a U-matic porta pack, they called it, where you had to, you really had to be, you know,
Iron Man.
Yeah, you really had to be strong to lift that thing around. But suddenly there was a freedom in that, and there were rules. You had to make up your own rules in order to be able to get people to watch, but also you could follow stories as they came up, and I found that much more invigorating. And I didn't have the man looking over my shoulder saying, this is what you should do, this is what you have to do, this is what the rules are. I actually depend on an editor who has a different head than mine.
Yeah.
And very often that is really useful, particularly for interview material, because I'm in the room, I feel a different vibe with the person than what is on film. Likewise, with material I get out in the field, you know, I'm suffused with what it feels like to capture the material. And then I bring it back, it's like, well, that wasn't so good, or that was awesome. And you don't really know. So having that other pair of eyes is, I find, really useful, and particularly in terms of structure. Because getting back to structure, I'm thinking, you said 11 days, I think, oh, for a structure like that.
You had years.
I don't know if you want to put that on your editor. I would have felt bad giving it to somebody else.
Because, you know, we were looking for something that was much more unruly and yet giving a sense of, you know, both treating this person's life. We had an antagonist, Vladmir Putin. We were telling the history of Russia since post-Soviet era. But also, we never wanted it to be, now we'll begin at the beginning and now we'll end at the end. We always wanted the present and the past to exist simultaneously.
Right.
So finding a way to mix all of those elements structurally, that's the first and hardest part. And that's a kind of back and forth that I enjoy with the editor, where the editor shows me, the editor in this case was Mike Palmer. Mikey would show me something, I would respond, and then we'd look again, I'd go back and look at something else. So it's that back and forth I find really useful.
You have a body of work that I would think would scare potential collaborators away.
That's true.
Has that ever been the case?
Sometimes, but sometimes people find peculiar things. I mean, weirdly, the subject of my film, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, saw Enron. Now, it happened that he knew Ken Lay as a business contemporary because he was in the oil business in Russia in the 90s. And so he sort of enjoyed it. It was kind of brash. But I think also he had been persuaded by people around him that, you know, I was good. And I think he was ready to be honest in a way. So I don't think it particularly scared him. He's also, I mean, speaking of macho, he's kind of a macho guy. But we had to sit down for a number of conversations ahead of time so that he could understand where I was at and more than anything, how seriously I was going to take the enterprise. And I think he was convinced I would, so we went forward.
How did you communicate that to him?
Mostly by listening, and also by being honest. You know, when I didn't know something, I didn't pretend that I knew it. I said, I don't know, but I'm here, I'm ready to learn. Because this was a high bar for me. I mean, I'm not a Russia expert in any way, shape, or form. I got interested in the subject in a way after our 2016 election, but I am a student of power and abuses of power, and certainly see patterns like that. So I think by being straight with him, that was the way I ultimately gained a measure of trust. And I think that trust maintains itself even after the film has come out, which the first half of it is very critical of him. The second half, you know, looks at him in a very different light as somebody who became a dissident. So but I think he was okay with that. Mikhail is not Oprah. He's not naturally sort of giving, and he was very stiff initially. But we shot an interview over 9 days, 4 days before I went to Russia and 5 days after I came back, and that was really important and instructive too, because having come back to actually give him information about how people saw him in Russia, because he's not allowed to go there, it was really interesting. So we ended up getting into a deeper and deeper and deeper discussion over time. And I think that's inevitably what happens. I think most of us want to tell our story. The key thing is being convinced that the person to whom you're telling it, is trustworthy, is going to be able to, be willing to be generous.